I have a question. Which of the following audio tracks would you consider to be a banshee? If you found yourself in the 1300s, you might just be asking yourself that very question. Hello, and welcome to the Afterlife. I'm Dre.
I'm Luke.
Tonight we're going to be talking about the Banshee. It's March now. We're around the time of St. Patrick's Day, so I think it's only fitting. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with a banshee is a female spirit in Irish folklore who heralds the death of a family member, usually by screaming, wailing, shrieking, or keening.
The first soundbite you heard was someone keening. Keening is a traditional form of a vocal, passionate expression of grief, often in music for the dead in the Gaelic Celtic tradition. The banshee was also associated with the death coach, being said to either summon it with her keening or to travel in tandem with it.
The second audio bite you heard was that of a screeching barn owl. To quote Dr. Emily Zarka, the owl's horrifying screeching could have made its way into the banshee's myth. Barn owls have since decreased in population in Ireland, but back in the 1300s they were way more plentiful and could be a possible source of the wailing associated with that of the banshee. Although not a case of a banshee, there is one story in Scotland that I would like to share. It is a story that I think most people attribute the behavior of a banshee with. Sir Alexander Senton was married to Dame Lillis Drummond. Now, he had been looking for an heir to his throne, and up to this point, he had only had daughters, and completely outraged with this idea, he wound up marrying the younger cousin of his said wife, and it is believed that she had gotten ill and had died. Whispers among the castle had suggested that Drummond was actually locked away in one of the hidden rooms within the castle, and had eventually succumbed to starvation. Alexander had married the younger cousin of Drummond, and on the night of their wedding, they had heard a loud screeching and wailing, blaming it on the wind. Upon the morning, Alexander found the name D. Lillis Drummond carved into the stone, and the name can still be seen there to this very day. Her ghost is said to roam the corridors of the castle, bemoaning the betrayal of her husband and leaving behind the scent of rose petals in her wake. Now again, it's not a story per se of a banshee, but I remember watching an old documentary as a kid, and that story just really stuck with me. And to be honest, I always thought it was the story of a banshee, and I think in media that is what we attribute to a banshee doing. You know, wailing outside of someone's window, clawing at the window, carving her name into the stone. Like, to me, that's crazy. It's one thing to have the story and the legend. it's something totally different to have the tangible evidence.
Does the cultural difference, is that why they don't call it Banshees, but it could be the same thing?
So, this is more of like a ghost story, although I can't remember the name at the moment off the top of my head, but Scotland has their own version of a banshee as well as Wales.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's all I was thinking about. Like, maybe if it occurred in Ireland, it would have been called a banshee.
That's what I'm thinking. It does have that sort of banshee essence, I guess, of the story, if you will. And like I said, even as a kid, I always remember hearing that story and believing that to be a banshee, but I stand corrected. Still a really interesting story, and I thought I would just kind of slip that in there.
Yeah, and then this Reddit story you sent me did occur in Ireland, and it's titled "My Grandfather Encountered a Banshee." My grandpa was in his 20s when this happened, so about 50 years ago. We live in Ireland, so there are a lot of witch stories and stuff like that. People are also very superstitious and very strict Catholics. Anyway, my grandpa was a truck driver, and he delivered beef to people who ordered some meat and butchers who needed resupplied. He told me that he was driving along one morning, and it was very foggy and quite eerie. He said he thought he saw something on the side of the road. On country roads here, we don't have sidewalks. He said it was the shape of a woman, but he drove on anyway. Then he saw her at the end of the road as he came to a stop about 20 meters. There she was, a ghostly figure with long black hair and had pale white skin and no shoes. Her face was horribly ugly with an elongated jaw and no eyes. She then let out an ear-piercing wail. My grandpa told me that he had never heard anything like it. It was so loud, his hearing was muffled for 20 minutes after it. Anyway, he was so scared he ran up the road into the nearest town, which was about 8 kilometers away. He had left his truck back there, but he said he wasn't going back there to get it. The ironic thing is that he lives at the opposite end of that eerie road today.
Wow, so foggy and eerie, that... Obviously, I've never been to Ireland, but that just kind of sets what I imagine Ireland to be. Just like very green and foggy on a morning. I'm just trying to imagine what that would be like. Just coming across this on a country road.
It does seem believable. It does set the scene. That's part of why I like the story. It had a good theme to it, or setting. Well, something I just realized is it doesn't talk about any, death.
Right, and
After the fact.
and that's what I found really interesting also. Because I remember...
It just talks about the scary experience.
Right, which kind of like makes me ponder the question, is there entities that people misattribute to being a banshee? And maybe it's some kind of other, woman in white, or some kind of other ghostly apparition that's misattributed? Or is it like indeed like a banshee, and maybe there wasn't some kind of death attributed with the story for whatever reason, or maybe it was just left out, or they just didn't know? Because I do remember hearing that it was believed that Banshees were not like evil entities, but they were deceased ancestors of very early tribes of Ireland. I can't remember what they were called at the moment, but they were believed to appear in preparation and warning these like early tribes in Ireland of impending death. And I believe it actually was specific to people with the last names started with O's, or the Max, or the Mix. Those were like the oldest or older, to the best of my knowledge, tribes in Ireland.
Yeah, and as far as the maybe confusing it with another entity, just reading when you read the Banshee description, even just the noises they make are all over the place. Like you have the keening, you have like the screeching, and then it almost gets into like the previous episode we did, the flesh gates. Apparently those make a bunch of different sounds too.
Right, and actually I think we did mention the same kind of thing in our last episode. Is it a flesh gate? Is a flesh gate another word for some kind of a skinwalker and or an entity similar to that of the rake? Or is it all one entity, or is it a whole different spectrum that we just don't know about? And I think that's what's really interesting. The fact that we know so much, yet so little. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. And I think we'll have crossover attributes, like entities that both have similar attributes.
Definitely. One that
They might just get difficult to identify.
One that comes to mind, and we'll have to do a video on later, is La Llorona. She has some similarities to a banshee, as well as some cultural differences, obviously. But we'll have to do a video on that later.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode of The Afterlife.
We hope you have a good St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, we hope you have a great St. Patrick's Day, depending on what time of the year you watch this video. Currently, as we speak, it is March 3rd. So hopefully you guys have this just in time for St. Patty's Day. As always, I've been Dre.
I've been Luke.
And we'll see you on the other side.